Hot takes. Let's get into it. All right. First hot take. Number one, no team tactics at a Wednesday night Worlds. Every person for themselves. Ryan Standish.
Yeah, totally agree. I'm on with that. I think, man, yeah, it's a training ride. Go as
Yeah.
hard as you can.
How often do you do something like a Wednesday night Worlds or like a local
Not very.
race ride as part of your training? No, why not?
Not very. There is a little, I guess, Wednesday night, Tuesdays and Wednesdays. There's now two group rides, but I don't have or I haven't had the guts to do what Keegan does and ride to the ride from Salt Lake. Like it's up in Park City, so it's like a 2 hour ride to get up there, and it finishes in the evening. So like at dusk. So I would have to ride 2 hours back home in the dark. um, the other one is it's just late on a Tuesday. It's like 6:30 p.m. and I just haven't done that one. It's the Tuesday night Emmy. Zach Calton and one of his friends put it together, and they just go hammer. It's like 20 minutes. They ride up Emigration Canyon on Tuesday.
I think that's one of the
Tuesday
most famous
evening.
group rides in the world now. It's
Yeah,
like,
the goal was to like beat. I think it was Levi Leipheimer or someone from the Tour of Utah had the calm, and the whole goal of this group ride.
Yeah. And Lucas User had one too. I saw. Yeah.
So yeah, the goal was to have. I think it's either Marcus or Nathan Spratt. One of the Spratt brothers got it. It's like 20 minutes. It's like average 25 miles an hour on this 4% climb.
It's pretty crazy, man. Yeah.
So Wednesday night
it's
Worlds,
not that fast, but
at TNE updates is
TNE updates. Yeah,
that's the group ride.
It's a funny follow. It's worth it.
It is. I feel like if everybody's group rides emulated that culture, oh, it'd be amazing. It's like,
yeah, there'd be no team tactics anywhere.
It's just everyone's having fun.
The whole ride is a team.
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But I guess sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
Okay. I guess saying that group rides are a good place if you don't have like a weeknight crit or somewhere to practice a lead out or do that kind of thing. I do think there is value in working on a lead out if you are on a group ride, and then everyone gets, maybe it's still dangerous, but everyone gets to kind of practice that racing. But
totally. Yeah. Head coach Chad Timmerman, is a Wednesday night race ride a good training tool?
Yeah. I mean, are we talking about the equivalent to our Tuesday night criteriums? The same thing, something that is supposed to be a race? Help me out with that, because if this is something else, I don't want to.
I think so. Yeah. I think the assumption here is that it's like a organized race group ride, not like a sanctioned race. Yeah.
Yeah. So from a coaching perspective, I think that's an awesome opportunity to work on team tactics. And I've been on enough teams that didn't gel well, and I don't want to figure that out come race day. I'd rather use a Tuesday night or a Wednesday night opportunity to iron out some of the wrinkles. But at the same time, it's super fun to just race for yourself, race selfishly. But with that said, if you're not super fit, that's no fun at all, because then you're just hanging on for dear life the whole race, and it's a waste of a training ride for you, unless you're intent on figuring out how to wheel suck and hide the entire time, which could definitely be useful. But I don't know. I don't want to sit on the fence with this, but I do think there are different perspectives to be appreciated.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. John, do you feel like it's against the spirit of a race ride to use team tactic?
No. I think team tactics should be welcomed and at any point. And if you don't want to ride team tactics, that's your decision. And it's foolish of you to try to imply your own will on other people just because you want the ride to end a certain way. Like, that's the roadie nature right there that I think is really unpleasant, is when they're like, they define these silly rules that don't need to exist. Like,
is that roadie nature or gravel nature?
Oh no,
actually, good point. I think we should just how the tables have turned. Eh?
Sorry,
totally accurate. That's foreshadowing.
I couldn't
for
help myself
later. Yeah. No, but it's no, like so I think especially if it's an actual like race, like Chad mentioned, we have our Tuesday night crit series or anything else. bring team tactics 100%. And if you don't want to do that, that's okay too. It's not like you have to do it. But I think that you can't separate team tactics from cycling. Like, they exist no matter what, and strange alliances will form. I don't care what jerseys you're wearing. Like, it's going to happen.
I love that.
That's like bike racing. So for anybody to try to say that it does or does not belong in any certain context is just trying to get everybody to play by their rules, so then they can have their own version of success. Gravel. So
Based.
anyways, yeah. Yeah, no, bring the team tactics. Like, TNE updates, best group ride ever. It is a giant team tactic, like Ryan said. It's so cool. So yeah.
Love it. Good stuff. All right, moving on. This submission, should I say who it's from?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
This submission is from mechanic Brad Copeland. He's all right.
Kate Courtney's mechanic. He's had a few successes, I think. He knows what he's doing. So
yeah, he asked, is Ryan's nose ring real or magnetic? This is not a hot take. This is a question.
He spends too much time looking at my face. But it's real.
Cool, okay.
Do I need to prove it?
Prove it. Yeah, no.
Like,
No.
pull a bigger hole in my nose.
Oh man. All right, let's get into gravel. Hot take: gravel racing is turning into what they said it wouldn't turn into.
Ooh, that's one submitted by John Wessling, by the way. Awesome friend, a good friend of mine, great dude.
Are we just doxing all the hot takes?
Sorry, yeah. We're not going to do this to everybody. I just wanted to shout out my friend because I like how he phrased it. I think it's cool,
Yeah. Well, an honorable mention: gravel isn't real. To which I had to reply to that and be like, "Hey, what's going on?" Another high-level mechanic submitted that, and their examples were like things like Belgian Waffle Ride, the best equipment was a road bike, right? And other gravel races, you don't need, but the best equipment is a front suspension or really, really big gravel tires, sometimes bigger than 40 millimeters plus. Like, I'm thinking of maybe Last Best Ride, the gravel race in Montana, where the bike to use was a mountain bike, Yeah.
Chad, you rode that, right? Like, it was pretty gnarly.
I didn't do the long course. I ended up bailing out because I took a wrong turn, did extra mileage, and I was having back issues and wow. But I didn't do, I think, the harder stuff. I did a top loop that was full on mountain biking, and it was super fun. But I think part of what made it exceptionally fun was that I was on a cross bike. I didn't have my gravel bike at the time, so I was on a cyclocross bike, which is effectively a gravel bike, shorter, a little more challenging geometry, but that's what made that part of it fun. Because if I had been on a mountain bike, I would have just sailed through it and it would have just been kind of a blip on the radar. And instead, it was inarguably the most fun I had on that entire course, which is a gorgeous course to begin with. But that section, it would have been non-noteworthy had I been on a mountain bike.
Yeah, these two hot takes are a little bit different in that one is kind of about the nature of what gravel racing should be as a discipline, and the other, I think, is like a bigger narrative about maybe, I don't know, the inclusivity of gravel or the like laid back nature of it, and that it's not that anymore. How do you interpret this hot take, Ryan?
I think, well,
we are live,
thanks,
by
John,
the way. This is a live stream. Yeah. Don't say anything.
Also,
like it's not just a Zoom meeting.
No. Oh, can I give a quick shout out to Ryan Standish? He's wearing a Rocket Sloth Co. sweatshirt right now, which is pretty cool.
Brand new one.
That's a brand new style. You can go to Rocket Sloth Co. What's the URL, Ryan?
rocketslothco.com.
Awesome. That's Ryan's company. And
you won't get it by Christmas anymore.
Yeah. True story. But anyways, sorry,
Ryan. Back to gravel turning into what they said it wouldn't
turn. Yeah.
I think the hardest thing is the industry pumping so much money into it. It's hard not for it to get more serious and less of that fun, inclusive, laid back style of racing. And I think that's probably the biggest driving factor, is that people are coming people are coming from the road or turning down world tour contracts to race gravel in North America and not go to Europe. So I think that's a big part of it. I really do think that the events themselves are still fun and more laid back. I think Lifetime has definitely added a more professional aspect to it in a way, in bringing really competitive and fast people together, which is always going to make it more, there's going to be more head sputting and more competitive racing. You always get yelled at for not taking a turn or not not racing when you're about to blow up, and someone's like, hey, you're skipping pulls. It's like, yeah, if I do one more pull, I'm going out the back. If I don't do one more pull, I'm going out the back in 2 minutes instead of 30 seconds. So I think, yes, it's becoming what they said it wouldn't, but I think it was also a very different sport 5-6 years ago when there wasn't the money in it that there is now. So it was people who are truly passionate about the events and the gravel, and now it's people who are signing big contracts to go do these races and to win or to be on the podium. So I think it's more of it's a sharp progression, but I think it was always gonna move in that direction.
Good perspective. What do you think, John?
Yeah, well, first, well said, Ryan. Like a really good analysis of it. Ryan's the only one qualified to speak on this, I think, like between all of us, right? Sure. On the other side of things, that like, as far as like gravel not being real, I think that what really they're getting at there is that like, it doesn't necessarily need to be its own genre and like tightly held, because if you look at it, it's so flexible in terms of the equipment that you use. And I mean, it's all just bikes, right, Chad? Like it's all just riding bikes, and you ride whatever bike. And that's kind of the fun thing about gravel is you can ride a mix, like you said, up in Montana.
Yeah, that's I think a huge part of the appeal is you can bring whatever bike you have, and if you're fortunate enough to be equipped with numerous bikes and you have to make that selection, then there's a bit of torment there. Anytime you have choice, you have torment. So you have to decide what's going to be the right bike for this course for me to ... Do what? Have the most fun, have the most chilled day and enjoy myself the most, or to be competitive and to win. So that much of it is interesting, and I think Ryan summed it up perfectly. I mean, once you pump dollars into something, it's going to change the nature of it. People are going to become competitive, and now, I mean, think if all gravels races were just points omniums and all that were on the line is points all the time, then it would draw a very different element than it does. You're not going to get the big money racers. Those people are going to sign contracts, European contracts, etc. Keegan's not going to be racing gravel. He's going to head over there and make some dollars as opposed to collecting useless points.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And honestly, it's probably, look, this sounds bad, but it's the best thing for the sport. And I know that like a gravel purist may be upset at hearing that from me. Maybe they're assuming I'm a capitalist, like a pig here, but I think it's the best thing for the sport because I still think it's the most unique genre of bike racing because the amateurs start with the pros. And so you can be on the course at the same time with them. And for that to be premier and for that to be the highlight or the focus of bike racing in America right now is very healthy, I think, in general, because it's a more collaborative experience between the pros and the amateurs. And that's something that's really unique. So I think it's actually, I think it's a good thing. And the cool part is, like, if you don't want it to be super corporate, super whatever, insert whatever, like oppressive term that you want, if you don't want that, then that doesn't have to be your experience. You can define what the experience is for you. And that's kind of the other cool thing about gravel races. Like, and even if so let's just say you want to skew racing too, then that's fine. Go do your awesome loops too. Like it doesn't force it on anybody else. It's pretty neat. There's a wide range. I still, for my money, I think my favorite event I've done is Stetna's Pay Dirt, the one here in Carson. It has the enduro format with the gravel mix, and it has trails that are better on a mountain bike, but not abusive on a gravel bike. It's just single track flow trail that you can carry a little more speed on a mountain bike. And it was so cool. Like the mix of people and bikes was the most broad I've seen. And then everybody was just having so much fun. And then knowing that there were segments and sections, it was really cool because it allowed people to just chill. And then when people wanted to go hard, it was really neat because on the segments, everyone was like, oh, this person's going faster than me. Go ahead. Way to go. Keep going. And like, they were happy to pull over because everyone knew that like we only had the segments to work on and we were just pushing really hard. And I saw people that had like mechanicals and they had like 4 people pushing them because their chain broke, right? Like it's a really cool, that's like the spirit of gravel. I think that a lot of people said it was going to be, and it's still there, but gravel has also allowed for other experiences too for people. So I don't know. I think, yeah, it's cool.
This is good stuff. We're pro gravel here, everyone. It's great.
Pro gravel.
All right. Dropper posts look horrible on any bike with curly bars or drop bars, and the UCI should ban them from road and cyclocross. I kind of agree with this hot take. It kind of looks like a Honda Civic with monster truck tires, you know? Like they're kind of conflicting ideologies. What do you think, Chad?
Yeah, but if you're sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just saying, if you're going off road, then you kind of want monster truck tires, even if you are driving a Civic.
Roasted, yeah, that's fine. Fine, yeah.
A few things. First off, I've in all my years, I've never heard drop bars referred to as curly bars, so that's what I'm calling them from now on because I like that way more.
I think curly fries.
That's exactly what I thought. Yeah, totally.
I think a curled mustache.
Soggy Arby's curly fries for bars is like a nightmare. That's disgusting.
Yeah. And secondly, I've never understood and I don't want to harp on Europeans, but the European resistance to any technological innovation. I mean, what's wrong with having better braking? What's wrong with having better tires, better traction, lower pressures, all the things that are offered by these innovations that are for whatever reason resisted because they buck tradition? I don't get it, and I don't think I ever will. Perhaps it's a cultural thing, perhaps it's a logical thing, I'm not sure. So you put a dropper on a bike and it's always a trade anyway. You're going to have to suffer the weight penalty to have the increase in capabilities. So it's not just a slam dunk. You do have to take a bit of sacrifice with the benefit. And I don't care what they look like. I really don't. I've seen some super ugly bikes out there. What's Nate's Shammy Hagar? I mean, that thing's hideous, but if it gets the job done and he likes riding it and it allows him to perform to the best of his capabilities and it addresses his limitations, then who cares what it looks like? And just dropper posts are awesome. Every bike I've put a dropper post on increases what I can do on that bike. It's the best thing ever. I mean, I raced mountain bikes in the early to mid 90s, where if you wanted to go down something steep, you dropped your butt off the back of the saddle and that saddle was in your rib cage and you either nailed it or you paid dearly. That those were the only 2 options, and droppers allow us a lot of flexibility.
Like you got your bib stuck on the back of the seat when you went to stand up again. You're like, oh, I'm stuck.
Yep.
This is bad.
You end up crashing and just have a saddle inside your bibs.
Yeah,
totally.
That's the worst.
John, you were very enthusiastically agreeing.
Oh yeah, I like what Chad said. I just don't understand the resistance to innovation. It all helps us, and when we embrace it, then it makes riding more fun and more exciting. So I'm a bit of like a diva with how my bike looks all the time, and I like my stuff to look really good. And in this one where he says dropper posts look horrible, I want to insert that like Big Lebowski meme, like, well, that's just your opinion, man. Like I don't think they look bad. And I don't think the UCI should ban them at all. In fact, I think the UCI should make a practice of banning less things. I think it just makes the sport more interesting. Look at running. And running is banning stuff too, and it's a pain. But look at how
what
much
is running banning?
Well, they have like a stack height with shoes, and now that stack height rule is changing, and it's getting pressed down, not just from elite competition, but down to average athletes. But when Nike brought out like the carbon plated shoes, and then everybody started bringing them out, and they started increasing stack height, and they started doing these wild things with shoes. And it was really cool because it was helping pros do more, but above all, it was helping amateurs really like avoid injury, run faster. It's way more fun to run in these shoes too. I know that sounds weird, but like the running experience is better. And if we continue to just have the UCI ban any new innovation, which it seems like they do that more often than they don't, and if they continue to do that, then it will just make sure that cycling continues to be viewed as like this kind of like dated, non-innovative like sport. And I don't think that that's beneficial for anybody, companies and anything else. And man, over the next like 3 to 5 years, the bike industry is going to be hurting really, really badly because of all of the compressed demand that we had satisfied, and then all the supply chain constraints that are going to be hitting a lot of these hardware companies. It's going to be rough. So UCI quit banning things and open stuff up so that these companies can release innovation, and then that can actually get them money, and then people can continue. Athletes like Ryan and Ivy can get paid, right? And more average athletes can have a better experience on the bike.
The hottest take of all. Episode's over. We're done. Y'all. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, guys. All right. Next one. The shamey discussion with Keegan left some deep scars.
That's not a hot take. That's a verifiable truth. That was disgusting.
We should do a recap, right?
I'm not sure I want to be right up to speed on this, but maybe.
Ryan,
well, yeah, I'm curious. Actually, I want to hear.
I haven't heard.
Okay.
This.
He was talking about his
I don't know the
spirit
context.
tour. You joined him on this spirit tour, so perhaps you can corroborate some of this. I hope you actually can corroborate this. But anyway, what he was saying is that, because I was talking about, like, you know, if you're doing like, because somebody was talking about not washing bibs. And I said, no, wash your bibs. It's gross. Like somebody said, like, you didn't have to do it. Like you could go 5 rides before washing your bibs or something. I was like, just wash it. There's nothing wrong with washing it. Like it's not a big deal.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Exactly.
Right. And then Keegan comes in with like, what was it? He
said
hand sanitizer?
To where he just uses hand sanitizer. And that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, and I was like, you don't like sink wash them with soap? Like you were staying at a hotel. You weren't like just like camping out in the desert. Like you were staying at a hotel. And he's like, no, man, I don't want to do that. That's like worse because you're getting water in it and who knows what's in the water. Instead, I just use hand sanitizer. And I was like, and I think obviously this person agrees. It left some deep scars. It was pretty darn gross, man. Like you just don't just like pour Purell onto your chamois and think it's better.
Did he just make that up? I'm going to call him out on that.
I don't know. It's gross.
I was there. I washed mine in the sink.
Did he wash his in the sink?
I don't remember.
Yeah.
But I feel like everyone was hanging up their chamois on their bikes to dry them out.
His was
Maybe he just hung it up without washing it. He just hung it up without washing it.
He just did it to not get roasted. He was like, I guess I'll hang them up.
He said that he'd rather
like
have
salty and
so he'd rather have a dirty chamois than to have one that was clammy, like kind of like wet and damp. And I was just like, dude, like you get over that so fast. It sucks when you put it on, but you get over it once you're riding. You sweat anyway, you know, but like.
See, we're not triathletes though.
Oh, Ryan, that was a low blow. You don't have to bring that into this. Okay, speaking of triathlon, can I insert a couple of hot takes really quick on triathlon, Ivy?
Yes, please. Yeah.
The fourth discipline of triathlon is not nutrition. The fourth discipline is laundry. It's absurd the amount of laundry you have to do as a triathlete. Like, and since it's like running and cycling and swimming and all that stuff, like it's not stuff that you can just toss in the dryer. You know, you have to wash it in a special setting and then you have to hang it to dry. It's brutal. And I don't know how they do it. I also don't know how triathletes follow anything more than a low volume plan if they have a career and a family. I just don't get it. You're super impressive. I don't know how. Those are my hot takes. That's it.
I think you also maybe, John, take more care in doing your cycling laundry than many people do.
Me for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't put Purell on it, but yeah. So.
But yeah, I mean, sometimes if I'm on a race weekend, I'll just put everything in the dryer. I know that's like super not good. You're not supposed to do that, but I mean, you got to race the next morning, like, you know, I don't know.
It. Yeah, I get it. You're
anyways,
pro.
respect.
You get kits and all that stuff. So
Yeah. Respect to triathletes.
100%.
Yeah.
Okay. Ooh, I'm excited for this one. Hot take: ice baths kill gains. John covered a little something kind of alluding to this in our cryotherapy for cyclists video that we will drop a link to. Thanks, Maxine. But Chad, I want to know what you found about this or what your opinion is on this.
Yeah. First off, I just want to offer my true hot take and just give you a one-word answer, which is duh. I mean, what biological process benefits from being frozen? I mean, what happens when you freeze any biological process? It impedes it, it slows it, it stunts it, it stalls it, and it impairs it. That's the word that they typically use. So it's the same with the cryotherapy video that Jonathan did. It's everything carries just the same way. We're taking an adaptive stimulus and effectively stomping it down so that we can't benefit from it. That is what happens if you apply it in training. And I do understand there's two sides of this coin, that we're not looking simply to use it as a training benefit, but as a recovery benefit, and a recovery in a very specific context. And we're talking, stage racers in between stages, players in between plays, for instance, football players, soccer, I mean, the football for the rest of the world players, the people who have to have these intermittent recoveries can benefit from this. You feel a little bit better. Yep, you tamp down inflammation, which in the moment can be a real beneficial thing. But when we squash that inflammation and that adaptive response that's starting to take shape, again, duh, what do you think happens? All the things that we want to achieve, we don't achieve. And a pretty, at least a recent post, not a super recent study, but a 2020 study, and then all the studies that came before it. So this isn't some new finding. This isn't, oh, and now we're seeing that turns out ice baths don't actually work. No. We've pretty much known this for quite some time. The research, at least, has supported it. But the most recent one shows that it negatively impacts muscle protein synthesis. And I know a lot of people hear that term and they think, well, I'm not a strength athlete. Why do I care about muscle protein synthesis? Well, we all should care about it, because anytime we damage our muscles, we need restoration. That's the synthesis side of things. We don't want our muscles to degrade past the point or exceed. We don't want their degradation to exceed their synthesis, which puts us in a negative protein balance. And those two processes are going on simultaneously all the time. So muscle protein synthesis is something we don't want to tamp down. So again, in training, following it with an ice bath, tamping down that muscle protein synthesis is not desirable. The anabolic signaling that follows strength training, endurance training, whatever, again, gets tamped down, not desirable. Ribosomal biogenesis. We always talk about mitochondrial biogenesis because we want to boost the quantity and the health of our mitochondria as endurance athletes. But again, from the muscle protein or the muscle skeletal muscle tissue side of things, the ribosomes are the big players, and we're basically telling them to shut off their processes. We're gonna freeze you to the point where you can't make muscle tissue because for whatever reason we don't want it, even though the training that we just told you that we just did is telling you one thing. We're gonna do this and tell you exactly the opposite. So, and they did a couple really straightforward experiments in this 2020 where they actually had them do some strength training oriented work. Put one leg in tepid water, room temperature, 30 degrees Celsius. I'm not sure what that translates to Fahrenheit, and then 8 degrees Celsius. So cold water on one side, warm water on the other side, or at least room temp water on the other side. And this is exactly what they noticed, the effects on the negative impact on muscle protein synthesis. Same thing. And maybe what lends confusion to this whole matter is way back 1985, there was a study that showed that, yes, it does impede these processes, but it doesn't affect strength gains. Again, duh. If strength gains are largely neural, then yes, I wouldn't expect this to impede it. But all the things that really support the sort of strength or the muscular adaptations that we're seeking aren't neural. I mean, there is a small neural component for sure, but largely they're metabolic. They're different physiologic processes that, again, we're tamping down by turning them off. And then when we go to the cryotherapy and Jonathan's video, we recognize that yes, there may be something tied to DOMS. There may be something psychological. There could be an upside to just feeling better and therefore performing better. That's all good and fine, but they conclude it with what smacks of marketing when they say you're going to have to do it 20, maybe 30 times, which just that's so much money and that's such an investment, and no one's going to do that. And who really benefits from that? But the people who own the cryotherapy facilities.
Yeah.
If you look at ice baths too, so like, cryotherapy is way less accessible than an ice bath, right? Because you have to have a cryotherapy facility close to you, typically somewhere around $50 US per session. And like Chad said, They recommend that you do this every other day and that you do it, continuously. They don't see the changes that are favorable. In fact, they only see negative effects typically in most cases until you get to 20 sessions. And then after that, your body seems to have some sort of adaptation that allows you to see some benefit. And typically the benefit is just reduction in inflammation. That's really what they're looking at. Reduction in reported like DOMs, those sort of things like that. But the main thing with this is that, if an ice bath is more accessible, first of all, ice baths are also quite expensive. If you're going to buy the ice or if you're going to build an ice bath setup or anything else to do that, that's quite expensive. Really, the goal is with this whole thing, is just to drop your temperature down. And people always say it's to drop your core temp down, but the science actually shows that dropping the skin temp has more effect on the muscles than just dropping the core temp. And interestingly, that you get more effect from something like an ice bath than you get from cryotherapy. All that said, when you train, you get inflammation, and that inflammation is involved and a necessary part of the process of adapting and getting stronger, like Chad said. So if you want to get rid of that, if you want to make it so that you train and then you don't get faster in between your training sessions, then go ahead and do them. But I don't know why you'd want to do that. The interesting thing is, for the use of cryotherapy, there were kind of two ways that it could be beneficial. We should separate athletes from average people, right, Chad? Like average people that aren't following a training regimen, that don't have to worry about compounding improvements in performance, in endurance performance. It can reduce inflammation and it could be helpful in that way. For athletes, it's looked at, they are proposing that there might be a case, and I'm not really fully convinced that this is solid yet, but there might be a case for doing it pre-exercise or pre-performance, as they noticed that there was basically like an adrenaline boost that athletes get, in addition, like heightened focus and preparation there just before an event for it. And then the last one is if you're in like a taper phase and you're not concerned with compounding gains and improvements, but you're just trying to reduce inflammation and be race ready, so to speak. In those cases, then it seems like it could be a bit more beneficial. But the last thing you'd want to do is use this after training, in the middle of a training block or anything else where you're actually trying to get faster, just because it's going to fly in the face of that. So the pre one is kind of tricky. Also with ice baths, that'd be really complicated. You get like freezing cold and soaking wet, and then you'd have to like dry off and get in your kit and then get on your bike, and then you warm up. And then at that point, you've probably increased like your core temp, and I don't even know if there's any more benefit from it. So I don't know.
Putting your body through a lot.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks guys. Rye guy, anything to add? Are you an ice bath guy?
Not really. Sometimes, like on a really hot day, if I get back, I don't go buy ice, but I'll just use cold water out of the faucet and sit in it.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
But more just because it's like you're absolute toast.
Yeah, more for cooling.
Like
less
that's like the best sounding thing, is just like being submerged in cold water.
No, think about that though. I mean, there is just a recuperative benefit, even if it is only psychological, because when we were up at Single Track 6 and we were staying in that overly hot hotel, and we'd come back from 4 or 5 hour race and we simply couldn't cool off, to the point where I was packing some makeshift ice packs on my body. It was the closest I could get to relief, other than staying in the lobby, which is oddly air conditioned. If we would had access to ice baths, I guarantee all three of us, we would have shared one if we had to. I mean, we would have gotten super cozy, just because we were miserable, and we knew we were going to have to sleep in that temperature that night with our body temps all revved up. We were going to have to race against the next morning with temperatures that had really barely cooled. It was still good and hot, even at the wee hours of the morning. So from a recuperative benefit, from a psychological benefit, from a training consistency or a taper benefit, there are applications, absolutely, where I think an ice bath makes good sense. But in terms of training adaptation, the science just doesn't support it.
Yeah, mid-stage race could be a great opportunity for it, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Every time we do a podcast, I learn something more about Single Track 6 that makes me not want to do it.
It's going to be great, Ivy. You'll love it, I promise.
Okay, can't wait.
It'll be a good time.
All right. Okay, moving on. Best holiday cookie or treat for training fuel. Ooh. I'm going to say just classic sugar cookies.
I like ginger snap or gingerbread cookies.
Me too.
Those would
Although
be
they've
my
got to be
favorite.
soft, right, Ryan? Like if they're
Yeah.
hard and crunchy and crumbly, then you're like inhaling cookie crumbs, and that's just the worst.
Mushy cookies.
Yeah, and an accompanying hot take for this: those that make crunchy or crumbly cookies are actually criminal. So it's a criminal thing to do.
Well, I
They should be
like
soft.
the ginger snap ones that are like super crunchy. I do
Ooh.
like
Really?
those.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I actually like those.
They're not crumbly. They're like rocks.
Crisp. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Not the word I would have used, but yeah.
Yeah. Like you might break your tooth on it.
Oh no. What's your pick, Chad?
I just any cookies really. We don't have a go-to cookie. There's always a pretty steady rotation of cookies in my household, and half the time that's what gets me on the bike is because I want to eat the cookies. So no go-to, but yeah, and I like breads too. But I guess the same problem with cookies is that there's a pretty high fat content with them. But banana bread and geez, I don't know what are other breads, zucchini bread,
Fruitcake.
things of that nature.
Fruitcake.
Yeah. Oh,
I was trying to
yeah.
think of what that was.
Mhm.
Cool. All right. On that note, hot take: Rice Krispie treats are the only sports bar you'll ever need. With honorable mentions such as Halloween candy is basically gels, and Scratch drink mix is just Rafa Gatorade.
That's awesome. I mean, that part's kind of true. Like it really is. Whoever submitted that one. That's a good one.
Man.
I look, like I don't think it's the only one you'll ever need, but Rice Krispie treats are darn good. Like even in terms of profile, if you get the home style ones, they're higher in fat. If you don't get the home style ones, like the normal kind, it's like it's pretty like a favorable profile, and they're easy to eat too. They don't crumble. They've got some good stuff, but it's not the only one you'll ever need. I've had a
they're not calorie dense enough. I think the calorie content relative to their size, you would have to pack your pockets so full of those to get through anything self-supported.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Sometimes
I'm thinking
though,
of
like a Pop-Tart on a long ride hits so good. Like strawberry Pop-Tart. Oh man.
Yeah, I mean, definitely love eating Rice Krispie treats on rides, but I'm thinking about like when I'm not training. I mean, yeah, some people I know, definitely not me, like not training, can like house like half a pan of Rice Krispie treats just like normally.
Easy,
like
no problem.
No problem. And then like you're training, like Chad's right, you'd have to carry so many of them.
You just have
I speak from experience. Pete turned me on to them, so now I'm hooked on them, and they're so good. But yeah, you would need a fanny pack, backpack, whatever. You'd have to carry quite a high quantity. I mean, good news is it wouldn't weigh that much, but it would take up quite a lot of space.
Yeah. There were a couple other hot takes that made me think of this one too, which is that getting into cycling is too expensive, and not a hot take, but a question: what do cyclists overthink the most? And I think nutrition and ride food can be one of them, both in like things that cyclists overthink and, put too much weight into thinking that you need like name brand stuff or super expensive stuff. And that can make it hard for people to want to get into it or know what to do, and maybe inhibit them from fueling correctly because of how expensive and intimidating it can be.
That's a good question to kick to everybody though. What do cyclists overthink most?
I think it's nutrition.
Is it the Dunning-Kruger effect thing that's like you're here and then like it rises up and as you get some experience, you think that you're at like an elevated plane, and then you return back down after a while and you're like, actually the basic principles are what matters.
I think that's the gist of it.
Yeah, I think so. I feel like at first when I started out, I was just like, okay, I just like eat sugary stuff, I guess. And then after a while I was like, oh my gosh, like I have all these options, and I got overwhelmed with the options. And now I know that you all think I'm overthinking it, but I'm not. I'm back down on the curve to like, I just need sugar and salt, and like
eat as much sugar as you can.
Yeah. And like get away from me flavors and like marketed products. Like I don't care. Like I just want glucose, fructose, salt. That's it. And like, I don't like, and I think that we get lost in the options, a lot of athletes, and they're like, and because of marketing, we think that like, oh, this product is super unique. or this one is going to give me what I need, when in the end it's just like your body's just like, just give me sugar and salt and I'll figure out what to do. Like it's just like, just don't deprive me, and don't put a bunch of crazy random stuff like flavors, colorings, anything else like into my stomach. Just give me sugar and salt and I'm fine. So I agree.
What do you Oh, go ahead, Rye.
Oh, I was just gonna say, it comes back to Halloween candy is basically gels.
Yeah.
Like,
true.
Ryan, what do you think cyclists
I see Chad shaking his head.
No, I was actually kind of in my own head at the moment. I'm not sure what the last thing you said. But I was, in terms of overthinking, I'm not sure if it's chicken or the egg. I don't know if cycling is often described as a thinker's sport. So I don't know if thinkers gravitate to cycling or cycling draws thinkers. It doesn't matter what order it happens in, but it's hard for me to come up with another sport where there's an opportunity to overthink so many aspects of it. And maybe that's because I'm immersed in cycling and I don't recognize the complexities of all these other sports. But when I think of cycling, there are so many avenues down which you could get lost, from aerodynamics to nutrition, to training, to any and all marginal gains. I mean, there's just so many things that we can get completely caught up in and totally lose the plot. And just what you described, eventually come back down and realize, wow, that was a huge waste of time. I knew most of what I already needed to know at the beginning of this process.
What cyclists overthink the most is cycling.
Yeah, there it is. I think it all kind of ties in what Chad said. It's like there's so many choices in cycling. And when you have so many choices and options and decisions, you just get lost in that. When, like, if a tire company made one tire, you would be stoked on that one tire. Instead, they make 6 different tires that do really similar things in some cases. So then you get stuck. You're like, I have to make a decision. I can't just run what I brung. I have to pick which one's perfect for this specific event. And then the same with fueling. It's like, how much water do I need? How much can I carry? How much can I get away without carrying? And food, and like aero helmet or non-aero helmet. Is my head going to be too hot? Like, do I wear a skin suit, or do I need more pockets? Or I think all of that adds to the decision making. Just having, you can choose between every single thing on your bike and every single thing you put in your body. There's multiple choices. And that if you had one choice, you would be happy all the same. So
I'm going to change my answer, Ivy.
Okay.
This one's going to get tricky. I think cyclists overthink their workouts.
Ooh,
like the exact thing that they're doing. When I talk to athletes like you, Ivy, Ryan, Keegan, insert whatever, like, you know, the fast athletes, when I talk to them, they're most interested and excited in the things that allow them to be consistent, like the life changes, or like the small little thing that they get that like allows them to be consistent with their training. And they aren't really concerned with their workouts. They know that the most important thing is that they're consistent. Whereas athletes are always looking for the secret workout. And that's why I think adaptive training is so important, because you can just trust that it gives you the right thing, and you can forget worrying about that, and then hopefully just focus on being consistent. So I think that they overlook all the minutia and tiny details of, what's the perfect workout for me that I need? And that's going to be the thing, when really, like, adaptive training is going to give you the right workouts. But honestly, like, if you don't do those workouts, it doesn't matter. And that, I know that sounds really obvious, but we forget that because we get so lost in the details of thinking about what the perfect workout is that we forget to even do our workouts. That's the biggest thing that I see. So
that's really great. Yeah, that's a good point. And fixating on things like, what percentage is this zone at? And my FTP could be off by 2 watts or 4 watts. And in reality, those athletes have a really hard time executing consistent power when they're doing their workout anyways, you know?
Totally. Yeah.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. Like with Ryan, it's like Ryan's got a new set of Kenda tires that he's just like stoked on his gravel bike, because now it's going to let him do way more things, and he's not going to have to think about it and switch things around. And he's just going to be able to train. Right. And instead of like, if I extended this interval by 15 seconds or change this, I either break everything or it's the perfect workout. It's never that. Instead, it's like, he's looking for things that enable him to be consistent. Yeah.
Totally. And I have my favorite gravel tire. I rode pretty much like 95% of races last year.
That makes you consistent.
So I was
That's
like,
the cool thing.
don't have to worry about that. Like, that's the one I like. That's the one I'm going to ride. So
any sort of barrier that we have in between us and doing our training, and if that's changing tires or doing anything like that, on the right day, any one of those seemingly small things is the straw that breaks the camel's back and stops us from training, right? Or I should say on the wrong day.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe this is exactly what explains that whole European resistance to technological innovation. Is just it works. It works well right now. Let's just leave it alone. We don't change it.
Don't give us another choice.
They're wise.
Yeah. I've stumbled onto something there.
Ryan, can I ask what that gravel tire is that you liked so much?
The Kenda Alluvium. It's kind of like a file tread
nice
tire, but rolls well. Has some good side knobs. So
nice.
Perfect. I do want to share from the live chat a few things that our athletes think cyclists overthink. Bike weight, zone 2.
Zones.
I can't clap hard enough right now for both of those.
Yeah.
Overthinking matching kits or what we look like, overthinking what my heart rate is telling me. And I think this is a dig at Nate, overthinking sock height.
For those that don't know, Nate literally sprayed 3M Super 77 spray adhesive on his calves so that his socks could rest at the right height. But really, it wasn't because he was trying to like stretch them or something. He just has very aerodynamic calves, as we've stated before. So his socks wouldn't stay up, so he had to spray it.
Look like 80s slouch socks.
Oh, it was a good memory. That was great. Yeah, loved
so
it.
Great. All right, let's get into the next one. Hot take: 1 hour rides do not prepare you to survive a 70-mile weekend ride. And intensity is not an adequate substitute for volume for races over 45 minutes. I love this question because a lot of people are using TrainerRoad and Plan Builder right now to plan for their long gravel races or Grand Fondos. And, they look at a lot of athletes can only handle a low volume plan based upon their work-life balance. And they are scared that if they can only manage low volume, how could they possibly prepare for a long event? John, we have a few resources about this. Yeah. And I'd like you to lead this one. What can you say about this?
Yeah. So this is a hot but understandable take, submitter on this one, right? It's all like logical and it makes sense. But I would argue that like in this respect that like a hotter take would be that you should do more training than your life allows, right? Like, but that's like the logical assumption. If this isn't accurate, then the other side of it would be, well, then I guess you just need to do more training than your life allows and it'll all work out. And that's not the case. The training you do will make you faster. The training you don't do won't make you faster. That's really important to remember. So no, I mean, we have huge evidence. Just look at the Successful Athletes podcast of athletes doing a huge amount of incredible things, like winning races, winning national championships, everything with like 1 hour rides, 90-minute rides, maybe up to 2 hour rides, but a lot of them less than that. And if you look, we have and I'll link to this in the description. We have a blog post that talks about pacing for events, and it talks about the energy systems that you use and how you pace based off of those energy systems. And that's really important to keep in mind. Like when you are doing a 3 hour race, as long as you're not, pacing it like a crazy person and sprinting as hard as you can from the beginning, if you're doing a 3 hour long race, there's actually not a whole lot different in what you're doing in 5 hours of racing compared to what you're doing for those 2 to 3 hours of racing. Your body, it's using the same energy systems. It's similar, and you'd be surprised about what you could do with less in that regard. So I do think that they prepare you to survive a 70-mile weekend ride. However, this is super important. That time has to be used wisely and it has to be structured. If you're just going out and doing 1 hour rides or you're just chasing random Strava KOMs or even just doing group rides, there's no structure to that. So you're not stressing those energy systems in specific ways for whatever that race is going to require. And so in that case, what you're doing is you're throwing something random and you're expecting a specific result, and that's foolish. If you're throwing something specific into the machine and then you're expecting a specific result, then that is as expected, and that works. And that goes in line with like intensity is not an adequate substitute for volume for races over 45 minutes. You're right in that it's not a perfect substitute. Clearly, there are two different inputs that you put into the training equation to make somebody faster. However, especially when we talk about the majority of training and performance on cycling is aerobic, right? The vast majority of it. And when you're talking about that, there's a lot of different ways to train your body to get aerobic performance, and you can train at higher portions of your aerobic threshold and get a huge amount of benefit that will transcend, that aren't just specific for that short, intense duration. They go to the longer, less intense ones too. So I think science debunks this one, and then practicality also debunks it quite as well. So
yeah, good stuff. I mean, Chad, head coach Chad Timmerman, you for sure have a wealth of knowledge on this topic. Yeah. What do you have?
So much. First off, I don't want to split hairs or be nitpicky, but these are kind of barbed statements, so I'm going to. First off, you say 1 hour rides do not prepare you to survive a 70-mile weekend ride. I can survive a 70-mile weekend ride right now, straight off the couch. Most people can. So if we're just talking about survival, just getting from point A to point B, you don't have to do anything.
Yeah,
but I get what you're saying. You want it to be not a miserable
at what cost?
Undertaking. Yeah. So, and just not true. I mean, one of my best seasons, and this sounds like it's all about me, but it's all about my bike classes, which were just examples of what people could do training for 1 hour, a couple days a week. And some of them would come in for the 90-minute workouts on the weekends, but they didn't get any longer than 90 minutes. So at the high end of things, people were training for 3.5 hours a week. And their performance just grew and grew and grew over the course of the season, as long as they abided this training schedule. So the workouts don't have to be long to cultivate what we're really after, which is aerobic adaptation. And it's that aerobic adaptation that allows us to do a 70-mile ride. And then when it comes to the intensity not being an adequate substitute, well, again, I'll split hairs. You said 45 minutes. I would push that number up to, well, again, the intensity can bring about the aerobic adaptation that allow you to do just about anything. You'll just have to doctor the pace a bit. I mean, you're not going to be able to go super fast or as fast as someone like Keegan if you're only training 3 hours a week, 5 hours a week, whatever it may be.
Even if you're training 20, you might not be as fast as him. Who knows?
Oh, yeah. I mean, just about nobody's.
Oh, right, guy. Oh.
Over here.
Except, right.
But a freak.
But the intensity argument breaks down because the body can only handle so much intensity. But intensity does bring about adaptations that are necessary to do things that seem out of line with what intensity is. I mean, you can do sprint intensity workouts, which are legit 20 to 30 second efforts 3 or 4 times over the course of a workout, and do that 2 or 3 times a week. And you can ride a stronger, faster 40K TT. It doesn't seem like it'll translate, but there is evidence that it does, anecdotal and within the scientific literature.
And let's not beat around the bush. This one's directly like targeting the reputation that some attach to TrainerRoad as being like pure intensity and that's it, which couldn't be further from the truth, by the way. Go to trainerroad.com, check out the plans. You can build it with Plan Builder and you can see for yourself. Because that's really what this one's getting at, I'm sure. And that's not the case. And even then, let's just say that you don't want to do tempo or sweet spot workout or something like that, or a threshold work. You have alternates, and we built in tools that you can select different workouts, and you can swap out that weekend ride and get a long endurance ride if you want. So like, you have the tools to change it around, but you'd be surprised at what people can do with less. And I think that even many people that are doing too much right now that don't realize it, they would be very surprised about their improvement when they would do less. Forgetting Sarah Marshall, wise words. And
do less. Don't think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
I just have one thing to add.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Consistency.
Mm-hmm.
If you only have time to do 3 hours a week, but you consistently do 3 hours a week leading up to your event, then that's going to be way better than doing 150-mile ride on the weekends being your 3-hour ride.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then taking 6 days off till the next one.
Yeah.
So if you do, if you do 3 1-hour workouts in a week, then your body's going to adapt to that.
Mm-hmm.
Versus yeah, you'll probably get some adaptation. This is me bro sciencing now. But if you do a 150-mile ride a week, your body's gonna lose that adaptation by the time you get to the next weekend.
Yeah, it needs to be consistently reminded of what you want from it, and it doesn't get enough consistency with a one time a week ride.
So that's great. my Coach Ryan edition.
It's good stuff.
Coach Ryan guy. Love it. All right, this is great. Thanks, guys. Okay, moving on. More pro races should have Le Mans starts because it's more entertaining. Does everyone know, for our listeners who may not know what a Le Mans start is, this is where you lay down your bike. Everyone racing lays down their bike some predetermined distance from the actual start, and racers run on foot to their bike in the pile of bikes and then begin their race. Is that an accurate description? We got it.
Ryan should kick us off because I think he's done one most recently out of all of us.
Yeah, the 24 hours in the old Pueblo, the epic rides. Yeah. They're scary.
Yeah, they stress me out.
It's scary. It is exciting, but man, running in bike shoes. There was one guy who was running he actually just had his running shoes on and just smoked everyone. I don't think he swapped shoes to get on the bike. He just rode on flat pedals.
How long of a run was it?
It's like
too long.
It was 8 to a quarter of a mile. It's not short.
It's more than a quarter mile for sure. It took us like 3 minutes.
Wow. Oh my god.
Full sprint.
In carbon shoes on a dirt road. And like you're like every step you're just like, how did I not roll my ankle? It's a miracle that it didn't happen. Yeah. No,
yes, it would be exciting.
for the watchers.
No, I don't think it would be good. Yeah.
What do you think, John?
Oh, 100%. It was, I did the start when Chad and I did it together with the team, and it was scary. I was just like every single step and I was also thinking about somebody with like cleats and carbon soles, like running and stepping on my ankle or something too. And like thinking like, I hope they don't have their cross spikes in or something I don't know. It was a harrowing experience. I don't want to go through that. And no, I think it's worse because it also just takes a bit away from the racing. For 24 hours in the old Pueblo, I disagree. I think it's perfect for it. It's exactly like the right thing for that event because that event, exactly. And the spirit of that event, which is just all about fun, craziness, like just a fun party. It's perfect. It's one of the coolest events, by the way. Y'all, if you haven't done it, get your friends and go do an event, do it again. Ryan, maybe we'll do it again next year. We're not going to do it this year, but maybe next year we'll put together a team again. That was good fun.
Yeah, Evelyn's trying to get me to do it as a duo this year.
Ooh, fun.
You guys you could do pretty well, I bet, as a co-ed duo.
Yeah.
I bet you could win. Yeah.
But
I mean, I know you could win, but I bet you would win, I should say.
Is it duo in a 24-hour race worse than riding solo though?
I think it's worse. Actually.
I think so too.
Because like having a hope of a break is worse.
Yeah.
Just smash my expectations and don't let me think that it's gonna let up,
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be brutal, man, because you would never be able to fully unwind because Evelyn's too
You can't
fast,
sleep,
too.
you can't
If you had a really slow teammate, it'd be kind of cool. Because you could kind of like have some time to chill, but Evelyn's the furthest thing from slow. So
and that would be kind of cool because you don't have
All right. Hot take. You're never too pro to wave back. John, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Like, well, yeah. I mean, you're never too pro, but I'm thinking there are some times when like a wave doesn't happen.
I feel really
like,
bad when I'm like mid interval, like really giving her and someone is trying to wave and it's so hard to like acknowledge that there's another person on the road, let alone take my hands off
try
the
to
bars.
get 2 fingers out.
Like, yeah.
I was actually just thinking about like one, I saw a friend on the road and I didn't even realize it was him because I was so boxed and I was doing intervals up Geiger, doing my workout. And he thought that I dismissed him, like get out of here sort of a thing with my hand. I was just trying to get in a wave, but I was so boxed that like I was like falling apart.
Oh no.
So I felt kind of bad. Apologies, my internet's messed up. So if it's messing everybody else up, I hope it's not. But anyways, that's where we're at.
No, it looks good. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I have strong opinions on this one. Strong feelings because I can't imagine a scenario where you can't wave. And the wave that was just described was a couple fingers off the bar. That's enough. That's enough to say, hey, I see you. You're riding a bike too. It's cool. And I wave to legit everybody. Even I said this before we had some difficulties there, but the Dewey Dans, the Dewey Dianas, the people who clearly have recently had a run-in with the law. They're not allowed to drive a car. They're on their bikes. They clearly don't feel comfortable. This isn't part of how they lead their lives, but still acknowledge that they're out there on a bike and they're a person who's removed from the little cocoon that is a car, and you just wave to them. It's just goodwill. I do, however, understand that you are, as Jonathan puts it, so boxed sometimes that you're not capable. But if you're capable of seeing the road, looking at your power numbers, you're capable enough to raise a couple fingers and say hi.
Or a nod, like
anything,
some like an acknowledgement. Like I'll nod sometimes, or if you're like out of the saddle, you can give a nod. I haven't quite mastered the one-handed out of the saddle.
Yeah,
the one hand's tough. That's not
on saddle yet. Yeah.
I think the best example of wavers, like cyclists that wave, that I can think of are all pro athletes. Like, you know, like they're the ones that wave the most. You know, it's like
Griffin wave the most to like, people that are.
I can see that from Griffin. He'd make me feel so good. Like he'd manage to do it while he's going on the other side of the road. Sorry.
Yeah, we wave the most to people that are just like open mouth staring, and you're just like, "Hello, hi," you know. Yeah,
for sure.
You want to like throw a Rice Krispie treat at them? Okay.
Hey, got snacks. Yeah. Okay. All right. Next hot take: occasional 10-hour rides are great fitness boosters.
This is submitted by Keegan, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't, but I asked him I did ask him for his opinion about it, and I'm not even going to share it because it was not helpful, because nothing Keegan does should be applied to anyone else's life.
Ryan, like this applies to what you just said, right? We're like, we do these big rides and we think that they're really beneficial for our fitness, but whether they cause us to skip rides afterward or whether they just cause us to not be able to absorb anything from the rides that we're doing, like it more often than not, it does. And actually, if you look at our data, it backs this up 100%. Like athletes that do what Ryan said earlier of doing the smaller workouts and being more consistent with those get more benefit than the athletes that do occasional or less frequent big rides. It's like across the board, the data shows that. So
I'm going to preface this with, we have another spirit tour planned down in Tucson in early January.
Bring your Purell. Yeah.
And I've been, and Russell Finstewald is the route planner, and it'll be similar to last year, except this time he said to bring lights, which definitely means a 10-hour day.
Oh boy.
So
you guys are different though.
Yeah.
That's the weird thing. Like us cyclists, right, Chad? Like we have power meters, so we think like, oh, okay, so like I can like look at what a pro does and I can just do that. But just because we can measure it the same and just because we know what they're doing does not mean that we should do it. And that's kind of like a fallacy that I see a lot of. I mean, heck, like there's a lot of training methodologies that are thrown out there and with validation that, well, the pros do it, so everyone should do it. And that just couldn't be further from the truth. Like you need to train, again, like what Ryan said, you need to do the training you can do with the time you have and with the ability that your body has to absorb. It's just,
Yeah,
Just
from a
'cause the rest of it
physiological
doesn't
perspective, I can't imagine anything that's achieved at that high hour mark that you can't get in 4 or 5 hours. I mean, if you are someone like Keegan, maybe you're super good at 7 and 8 hour rides. I don't even think Keegan's going to benefit from tacking on an extra 2 hours. I think he'd be better off dialing it back to 6 hours and doing 3 days of 6 hours than 2 days of 8, than one day of, God forbid, more than 10. And just again, physiologically, when we do the long endurance work, we're looking for a particular branch of signaling, the calcium signaling. Muscle releases calcium, or calcium presence increases with muscle contraction, et cetera. That presence of calcium leads to certain signaling adaptations that take place. And that's one way. That's the long, slow distance approach to achieving aerobic adaptation. But there's got to be a point where that plateaus and even starts to incrementally decline. There just has to be a point where what you would be gaining from that increase in calcium signaling comes at the cost of the amount of gastric distress or gastric abuse you're inflicting on a system that's still ingesting carbohydrate for this many hours, for the recovery trajectory, for the muscle damage, for any aches and pains in your joints, and all the things that are going to set back future training.
Those are the kind of things that I think about too when, people like Keegan say things like, oh, the 10-hour ride is just so mentally nice to take a break from structure and just like go somewhere new and do a cool ride and see pretty things. But for some, which I don't actually believe that.
Like none of us look like at 10 hours, nobody's happy.
No.
At 5 hours, nobody's happy. And nobody's like, oh, I'm so excited to see new things,
Yeah, the number of, or the ways in which I would put my body through so much distress, like what Chad was mentioning, the gastric distress and just like things like joints and pains, like I wouldn't feel mentally refreshed after something like that. I would feel like pretty bummed out, It's not like I'd be like, wow, I did this cool thing. I would be like, oh no, I need to take a week off the bike or something. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think, Ryan?
I guess the only kind of benefit of doing a 10-hour ride is if you're preparing for an event that is 10 plus hours long, because it's nice to know where your head's going to be at 10 hours.
Yeah.
Agreed. I think it's
and
more
that's
of
a case.
Like the 10 hours is more of a mental thing, but
yeah. And I can't disagree with that. And I want to, but it doesn't. And we're asking here, is it a great fitness boost? So arguably,
boost, no.
Got to say no.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, the tricky part is
6 hours is the same.
Yeah, and a lot of athletes, Ryan, will be tempted to do that 10-hour ride before their 10-hour race within the handful of weeks leading up to their big event, or at any point in their training plan beforehand. And what that typically means is hampered training and recovery for a significant portion of your training thereafter.
Probably.
So if you look at it, it would actually like forget where your head's at on race day. Like if you don't have the performance to do well, then you're going to end up with a worse time in most cases, but there's a lot to be learned. Like that's why we kind of built in the alternates to our plans to allow people on the weekends go out and do a 2-hour ride or a 3-hour ride, something like that, change it up. You can do it inside too, if you want, whatever strikes your fancy, but because you can really get like your nutrition and equipment and that sort of stuff figured out with just it doesn't have to be the full distance that you'll end up riding. You can figure that stuff out with even the shorter distance. So, yeah.
There's merit in practicing it, but I think we can all agree, not a fitness booster.
But not fitness,
Yeah, too many downsides for fitness.
Yeah.
It comes back to that, like if you ride 50 miles once a week versus riding 1 hour 3 times a week, it's the same thing. If you can do 2 5-hour rides, that's way more valuable than 1 10-hour ride, because you're going to be able to recover and do it week in, week out.
Imagine having a 10-hour training week spread out amongst 4 or 5 days, or just 1 day a week. Like,
do all the intervals, do everything that you're gonna do. Oh, that would be terrible.
Horrible. We don't recommend that. Please don't.
Keegan salivating weirdo. So yeah.
All right. Nobody actually knows if adding 3 hours of strength training is better than adding 3 hours of riding. I think Chad knows.
Yeah.
Someone knows.
Just about all the sports scientists and coaches who read and athletes who listen to coaches who read. And we do know because this has been done. It's been done a lot. When they say most of the time they construct not double blinded, but a controlled trial where they have one group doing one thing, one group doing another thing, and then the controller does nothing. It's often we're going to take out 3 hours of your riding and we're going to do 3 hours of strength training instead, and then see what the differences are. I mean, this is a very studied thing. So we do know, and the benefits then become arguable. So maybe that's what you're getting at here. Is it definitively better? Well, it's going to depend on a number of things. It's always contextual. What are you trying to improve? What are you trying to benefit? Do you have 6 hours a week to train and now you're dedicating 3 of them to strength training? That's a different conversation than having 10 hours a week. It all gets tremendously complex, but it's pretty hard to argue that there is benefit with strength training. Whether or not that improves your endurance, that's definitely arguable.
Mm-hmm. And that context of the whole scope of your training within a week matters so much. John, now that you're a time crunched athlete,
excuse me, time crunched triathlete.
Okay, thank you. when do you decide to take autonomy and make those decisions of when something such as strength training would be more important than an endurance ride?
I don't think it ever takes priority over the 3 disciplines that I would be doing, or if I was just cycling, it would never take priority over my cycling training. It can't do that. If you're doing that, then you're doing it wrong. You're being a strength athlete that's supplementing with cycling instead of a cyclist so if your expectations are to be that on race day, then that's fine. But if your expectations are to be a cyclist, then you wouldn't want to do that. So it never bumps it out. I've found a lot of benefit in the strength training side of things. It's really easy to blow yourself up as a cyclist when you start strength training. And then if you're not consistent with it, it's really easy to blow yourself up too and then compromise your training. I found a huge amount of value in just peppering in strength training throughout the day. Once again, we're not reaching for hypertrophy. We're not reaching for increase in 1 rep max. We're not doing any sort of those things. What we're looking to do is build a durable body and also to build a body that's able to move functionally across the different planes that you might use in cycling and that would allow you to do your strength training as well. And when you look at that, it's about I'll fit in the morning. I'll do a small bit of strength routine with the kettlebell. And here at the office, I'll jump into the gym a few times a day and I'll do some different stuff. And I've started to make that more of just a consistent thing that I pepper in throughout my day. That actually helps me with being more consistent with strength training. If I look back at the week at what I did, rather than trying to set aside a block of a half hour to do my strength training. Now that may not work for everybody, but for me personally, that's been really helpful to do it that way. Chad, you raise your hand.
Yeah, the rates of recovery actually make these waters even muddier. So if we ever go back to that podcast format that we tested out, the abstract there, I've got locked and loaded a couple of studies that talk about the difference in fiber types across athletes is nothing new. We all understand this, but it can affect the rate of recovery when it comes especially to strength training. So if you're an athlete who is predominantly fast twitch and you do the same workout than an athlete who is predominantly slow twitch and you measure it against the same metrics, you're doing the same percentages of your 1 rep max, you're doing the same recoveries between, you're doing the same exercises, everything else is just the same. How quickly you bounce back from that workout can be very different from athlete to athlete to athlete. So if you layer that on top of your endurance training and you don't have a handle on the fact that you recover at a different rate than someone else, or maybe even just relative to your endurance work, then you could be carrying, more and more fatigue as the week moves on, as each week folds into the next week. And then when you get around to eventually recovering, if you're not just completely dragging by that point, you may not emerge from that recovery week in a state that's fit to see more strength layered on top of the endurance that you still haven't rebounded from.
Well said.
Well, Chad, I will, in the next hot take, make space for a shallow dive for you so you can get into some of those studies. Is that a good compromise?
Yeah, no, that works too.
Great.
I may have just covered it, so there may not be much more to flesh out there.
Done. All right. Hot take: an hour of VO2 30/30s is mentally easier than a continuous hour of zone 2. I absolutely agree with this. Not, I don't think everyone does, because VO2 max efforts are pretty brutal. But what do you think, John? You agree?
It depends. I think that most people, I want to clarify this, is a huge asterisk, like a continuous hour of zone 2. Ivy and I have mentioned this on the podcast, and we will continue to beat this drum. Ryan sees it in other athletes' data. Chad has seen it countless times. When you tell athletes to go do a zone 2 ride, they rarely do a zone 2 ride. And holding continuous power in zone 2 is not easy. It starts to add up real quick, and it starts to compound. And then eventually you're doing power that you look down and you think, how in the world am I struggling with doing this power? And of course, that's typically far beyond an hour, right? We're talking, once you get 2 to 3 to 4 hours into the effort, it's really starts to like kind of boil you like a frog. It's quite uncomfortable. But so if I'm talking about a proper hour of zone 2 versus a proper hour, and I assume it's not just nonstop 30-30s for the whole hour, because if that's the case, that's gonna win. That'll be way harder. But if it's like sets of 30-30s as they'd typically be laid out in a normal VO2 max workout, no, I mean, for me the 30-30s are harder. But I think that a lot of athletes really struggle with just holding constant power for 2 reasons. They either ride outside a lot, so they're used to constant micro breaks, and as a result, they have not built the muscular endurance necessary to be able to maintain that. But they've also, potentially, the second thing, not built the mental endurance to be able to just hold on to that. And that's something that's tough, and it takes a very disciplined athlete to build that. So I could see why this would actually be a lot harder. ADD brain get very excited when it sees up, down, up, down, up, down. Yeah. And so that's easy to stay engaged in, whereas something that's just hold it steady can be really tough.
Yeah, you're attacking me right now.
Sorry.
That's okay. Ryan, would you rather do an hour of VO2 30-30s or continuous hour of zone 2, which would be mentally harder?
On the trainer, like inside?
Both.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, let's do that.
Inside, I guess I like 30-30s. So
yeah.
I'm going to go with that. I also like riding zone 2, but I'm good at riding in zone 3 instead of zone 2. So.
That should be there's a t-shirt idea somewhere in there, Ryan.
Yeah. Is that something you do? I say I'm good at that, or I'm, like you said, John, I'm bad at riding zone 2?
Yeah,
because exactly. I ride zone 3 instead.
Yeah, that's common.
How about you, Chad?
This sounds like it's coming from someone who is probably pretty familiar with intervals and has just now been introduced to the idea of doing something like Pettit on a frequent basis, and is coming to terms with the fact that it really is difficult to sit at even 60% of your threshold for a steady hour unrelentingly. And I do want to couch this as a trainer ride, because out on the road it's different. You get breaks whether you try to stay on the gas as consistently as possible. You're going to get little micro breaks. You don't get them on the trainer, and this just runs you into the ground. And if you bring fatigue into a workout like this, it's demoralizing. It's so tough, so much so that a 30-30 workout would probably be actually easier, both physiologically or physically and mentally, just because there are breaks. But this is unrelenting work. But with that said, do these, get used to them, and it becomes like anything else. You get used to it. I can hop on, not recently because I've been off the bike for so long, but I can hop on and I got to a point where Pettit was just a normal thing. It's like, oh, I'm a little tired, but I know I can do this. Oh, I'm fresh. I can definitely do this. As opposed to doing, and 30-30s, that's kind of a subjective game too. I mean, where are you doing those 30-30s? 120, 130, 135% of your threshold? Because that drastically changes the workout. But interestingly, I think that 30-30s is one of my, if not my favorite workout format. And this all was inspired years and years ago by a study that pointed out how if you match the recovery duration to the work duration when you're doing high intensity intervals, you can theoretically do them all day. So if you do up to a point, I mean, it can't be like 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off, but if it's 30 on, 30 off, 40 on, 40 off, 60 on, 60 off, even 2 minutes on, 2 minutes off, with that much recovery, you can do a heck of a lot of these. And maybe that even breaks down at the 2-minute point. But with something like 30-30s, it's only 30 seconds worth of work, and it's matched with a full 30 seconds worth of recovery. And you can get a lot of recovery done in 30 seconds following 30 seconds worth of work.
I've got a hot take that I have zero scientific proof for, that has come up from Chad's conversation right there.
Oh boy.
That the reason that many athletes struggle with long climbs or long events sometimes might not have to do with their FTP being low or bad pacing, but that they are not used to doing something without breaks.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah.
And I think that that's even those small micro breaks when you have to just like coast to make like a right turn or a left turn that's tight, or you have to stop at a stop sign and keep going. You know, when we had Jim Miller on the podcast, I think he mentioned this, or maybe it was in a separate conversation with Jim, but he hates it when his athletes have to take their their foot off the gas at all. Like, he doesn't want them pressing hard power all the time. You know, that depends on the workout. But on those, especially on those aerobic days, he wants them to have a route where they just do not have a single reason to ever ease up. Because there is power in that. And it's amazing when you're doing these sort of rides, you back off for 15 seconds, 5 seconds even, and it's crazy. You feel like a fresh new athlete when you start pedaling again. Mm-hmm. There's a lot to that accumulation that you get of just that consistent effort without any sort of break. It's why the trainer is so productive. And if you are going to take your workouts outside, really, really, really try hard. It's not possible in every area. We're super spoiled where we're at because we have that sort of opportunity, but really try to find terrain and roads that allow you to satisfy the workout as it's prescribed, because it really does make a difference, particularly with this sort of stuff.
That's super sound advice. Ryan, you were not allowed to coast or turn during the Spirit Tour. Sorry. It's for fitness.
That's going to be tough.
Those downhill rock gardens from
Finsty, have to figure out how to hike. Yeah. And all the sand riverbeds.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right. Hot take, getting out of the saddle during intervals is cheating. I mean, I don't think cheating is a funny word, but I think that there are times in which the system that you need to be targeting during an interval might not be able to be met if you're getting out of the saddle more than once or at all. Yeah, Chad, what do you think?
Well, actually, we should go to our resident crit racer, Pete Morris. Sorry for everybody not joining us on YouTube.
Is that
Ryan's,
me?
Yeah. I couldn't change Ryan's name, and I'm producing this week, and I didn't know how. So he's Pete for this week. So Pete's awesome. Ryan's awesome. But Pete, used to just absolutely prod Brandon, our COO, because Brandon loved to get out of the saddle all the time. And Pete never gets out of the saddle because, and to Pete's point, he's like, hey, like, I want to be able to do that power in the most aerodynamic position and efficient position as possible. And that's why seated power is king. And he would work on that all the time. And he would try to do everything that he could to avoid standing. Now there's granted like specificity for the different sort of events you do, but it's not cheating, but we definitely use it to give ourselves kind of a break. And if that means matching the work and doing the work, then I think it's good.
Yeah, you still have to do the work, and it isn't cheating the work, and it's not going to take you out of some energy system unless you're just horribly inefficient. Mm-hmm. So if you're doing a sweet spot interval and you move in and out of from seated to standing and back and forth, you know, maybe you nudge up a little bit and you're pushing watts that are a little outside of sweet spot temporarily. But by and large, all told, that interval is going to be a sweet spot interval. It's going to bring with it the changes that you'd get from a sweet spot workout. I think this probably comes from us requiring really that people don't get out of the saddle during FTP assessments. And that's just because we don't want to inflate it with an additional anaerobic contribution that'll tweak the numbers a little bit. They'll probably not enough to really even matter. We just want to be honest with the numbers. So really in that case, if you're cheating anything, you're just cheating yourself of more accurate representation of where your functional threshold lies. And then
and Chad, if you can't, but now just use AI FTP detection instead. Stand or sit, do whatever you want. Who cares?
Exactly. Go crazy. For you. Do everything out of the saddle. I don't care.
Yeah. You can sit on the couch for that one.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it'll figure that out too. Yeah.
Wow, Ryan, marketing guy, you're hired. Sit on the couch, get your FTP.
You can do your FTP test from the couch.
It's true. Yeah.
Yep.
Right. Anything else to add on getting out of the saddle? We're okay with it, but sometimes, but maybe not.
Yeah,
Definitely not
there's
for
no cheating.
strength endurance, like low cadence. Don't get out of the saddle.
Yeah. I guess there's probably like a unique thing that if you're really working on like low cadence out of the saddle, I could see that. But
and even then, I don't think it would be cheating. You just wouldn't be able to do it very well. It'd be super hard to
Yeah.
keep steady resistance on the muscles if you're standing and really emphasizing the downstroke.
Agreed.
Also, if you can lay down a massive attack without changing your body language, people just like
lose their
I feel
minds.
like that breaks people. Like,
Yep.
like he didn't change anything and he just rode away.
He's just moving away from me.
How'd he do that?
Yeah. Like, what?
It makes them think that they changed something, right? Like I must have just gotten really slow all of a sudden because Ryan didn't even change his body position and now I'm gone. So yeah, it's a good point.
Valid. Okay, very last hot take. Hot dogs are sandwiches. Resident Octodog expert.
Who else would it
Wait,
be
is
for?
It's not from me, but
it's for you probably.
I mean, you can look at there's a lot of different kinds of sandwiches. You got like a hamburger's kind of a sandwich. It's in a piece of bread. Hot dog's just a long sandwich.
I think hot dog is more of
a baguette.
Is actually
that's a sandwich.
Hot dog is in a taco category, according to my opinion.
Whoa,
It's bread with protein in the middle, though. It's not a tortilla; it's bread. It's
but
flour.
I'm thinking about the surface area.
But tortillas are flour too.
Touche.
Oh my gosh, it's actually a taco.
Okay. Everything's a sandwich.
Hot dog is taco.
No, everything's a sandwich. That's the real
taco
takeaway.
is sandwich.
Think about a pizza. I mean, a pizza is just an open face sandwich. It's bread, it's cheese,
God.
it's
like
sauce.
a calzone. A calzone is a calzone is a sandwich.
Pie is sandwich.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Everything.
So-
Turducken even is sandwich. So
Lasagna is sandwich. All right,
And
this is
if
probably.
I'm gonna go yes.
On that note,
if Ryan deems it so, I bow to the Octodog man himself. He knows what's up. So
We can just say that sandwiches come in all shapes and sizes.
Yep. You heard it here first. On that note,
hot take.
Thanks for joining us on the
Okay.
Ask a Cycling Coach podcast. All right. Make sure to like and subscribe. If you haven't given us a 5-star rating on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts, make sure to do that. We need it. We appreciate it. Stay tuned for more hot takes in the future. Love you guys.
happy holidays, everybody.
yeah, happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Bye-bye.